and bourgeois were very much seen as these sort of foreign upstarts that had kind of collected this huge amount of pictures and had quite a lot of money, but were very, very heavily criticized. So bourgeois manages, notwithstanding this, to get his place in the Royal Academy, and eventually gets a knighthood as well. So he's Sir Peter Francis Bourgeois. The knighthood and many of the social distinctive features come through a very interesting link, which is the link with the King of Poland, Stanislaus Augustus Poniatowski. Now, Poland is a strange country in terms of monarchy. I mean, it's a monarchy at this point, but it's an elected monarchy. It's one of the few countries in Europe where this happens. So, in fact, there is no dynastic succession. Kings are elected like a president. So they might not have anything to do with the previous king. And in fact, Stanislaus Augustus is elected partly through the connection of his ex-lover, who is Catherine the Great of Russia, who at that point is the ruler of Russia, and pushes for the young, very handsome and very talented Stanislaus to become king. Now, Stanislaus's great interest is, again, in the arts, and particularly, apparently, Dutch art, as we'll see. And of course, in London, Desmond Bourgeois had been buying a lot of Dutch and Flemish art at this point as well. Through Stanislaus Augustus's brother, Michael Poniatowski, who travels to England in 1790, Stanislaus decides to appoint Desmond Bourgeois as his main agents in England to buy pictures. And the idea is that Stanislaus wants to found a National Gallery of Poland in Warsaw. And so the idea is that Desmond Bourgeois will buy as many pictures as possible, send them to Poland, and that then this National Gallery will be created. This, unfortunately, is not the case. The king makes Desmond his consul in London, so Desmond becomes consul of Poland in London, and gives Bourgeois knighthood. So this is the Sir before Peter Francis Bourgeois, which in fact is a Polish title, which is then accepted by the English crown, but it never is a full English title. It all fails because of political reasons, and by the late 1790s, well, mid-1790s, the political background behind Poland has drastically changed, and Catherine's relation with Stanislaus Poniatowski has also changed. And suddenly Poland is a problematic area, and the country ceased to exist in 1795. Stanislaus Augustus is deposed, effectively, he goes into exile, and he is really the last king of Poland. No king is appointed after him, and at that point Poland is then divided into three different countries, and divided between the three neighboring countries. So a large chunk goes to Russia, part of it goes to Prussia, which then becomes Germany, and part of it to Austria. And Poland, as we now know it, is a much more modern country. So the country doesn't exist anymore, the king is not king anymore, but by this point, for 5 years, Bourgeois and Desmond have been amassing pictures in London for this king, and suddenly they're stuck with them. They have something like 200 pictures, and they have absolutely no idea what to do with them. And Stanislaus promises that he will pay for the services and will eventually buy the pictures, but 3 years later he dies. And so Bourgeois and Desmond try to sell the pictures, and first of all they try with the Tsar of Russia. By this point Catherine the Great died as well, and so they ask the new Tsar, Paul I, but Paul never even bothers to answer their letters. So they're stuck with the collection, and this is the moment really, after 1795, when the market turns into a proper collection. And suddenly they have a house full of pictures, and probably because of Bourgeois being the one interested in paintings, they decide to keep them actually and have them in their house. The house is somewhat open to the public, people go and see the pictures, it's well known in London. This is the moment, 1790s, where of course English collections are outstanding, but it's also the moment where the reason they're outstanding is because there's just been the French Revolution. And of course, after 1789, so many pictures are flooding into England because all the French aristocracy is selling everything. And the first great sale at that point is the sale of the Duc d'Orléans collection, and all of the Orléans pictures come to England, and they're exhibited for weeks and weeks in London, and then eventually sold. And it's amazing how many of the pictures in public collections in England to this day are all Orléans pictures, which used to be in Paris. And in fact, we have a few of those. But most of the pictures that Desenfants and Bourgeois were buying were coming from France. They had very close links, let's just go back to do that for a second. They had very close links with very influential French people, with Lebrun, who was a painter and dealer in France, who was married to the famous female artist, Elizabeth Vigée-Lebrun, and so through them they bought a lot of pictures. And also they were very close to Alexandre de Calonne, who was the Minister of Finance in France before the Revolution, and of course what a tricky position to be in at that point. And obviously with the Revolution, Calonne was disgraced, tried in many different ways to save his money, save his life, and eventually mortgaged his collection with Desenfants and Bourgeois, got a lot of money from them, left the collection to them, eventually couldn't pay his debt back, and Bourgeois and Desenfants kept the pictures. So a lot of our great pictures, again, come from France and from Calonne. Bourgeois, we know, was very, very fond of collecting and very, very fond of all sorts of pictures, in particular Dutch pictures. But we have wonderful letters from Desenfants complaining about how much Bourgeois is buying and how, at this point, they have no money left. They've invested so much money in this collection, which is not going anywhere. And Desenfants very finally says, Bourgeois is like a kid in a toy shop, and whenever he goes to an auction or anything to do with art, he comes back home with lots of pictures, and that becomes a problem. And the two seem to have been arguing about it for a while. But in 1807, Desenfants dies, and so Bourgeois is suddenly the heir of the whole collection and the house. By this point, let's remember, all of the collection is in their house in central London. And so the idea starts of what to do. I mean, Bourgeois is not married, Desenfants didn't have any children, Bourgeois keeps living with Desenfants' widow, and so the idea is to create a museum. And the first thing they do is they ask Sir John Soames, the architect, to build a mausoleum attached to the house where Desenfants is buried. And so the idea is to transform the house into a museum with the collection in it. But unfortunately, they don't manage to do that because the freehold, the property of the house, belonged to the Duke of Portland. And the Duke of Portland, like most of the English aristocracy, didn't like the idea of these French, Swiss people buying the house, so refuses to sell it to them. And at this point is when they realize they need to build a museum somewhere else. And the idea comes of Dulwich College because of various links and family friends that Bourgeois and Desenfants had. The idea is that the pictures will go up there to Dulwich Village. And so when in 1811 Bourgeois dies, quite young, after an unfortunate fall from a horse, he leaves everything to the college on condition